My brother told 200 guests I was obsessed with his wife. Her reaction made him collapse. My brother Corbin and I were never close growing up. He was the golden child, the athletic one, the one who got the bedroom with the bigger window. I was just Wes, the younger brother who tagged along. When I turned 22, I moved 3 states away for work, and honestly, the distance helped our relationship more than anything else ever did. We started texting regularly, having actual conversations, and for the first time in my life, I thought maybe we could be real brothers. Then, he met Claire. Claire was someone I had gone on exactly 2 dates with back in college. 2 awkward coffee dates where we realized we had zero chemistry and mutually ghosted each other. When Corbin told me he was dating someone named Claire and showed me her picture, I laughed and told him about our failed attempt at romance years ago. He got quiet on the phone. I assured him it meant nothing, that I barely remembered her, and he seemed to accept it. They got engaged 8 months later, and Corbin asked me to be his best man. I was genuinely touched. I took time off work, flew home for every event, spent way too much money on his bachelor party, and I did it all happily because I thought we had finally become the brothers I always wanted us to be. A month before the wedding, Corbin called me upset. He said one of his groomsmen had dropped out due to a family emergency, and now the numbers were uneven. He asked if my best friend Silas could fill in last minute. Silas agreed because he is a good person, and Corbin seemed so grateful. He told me he was doing a charcoal and burgundy color scheme and sent Silas a link to the exact suit he wanted him to wear. Silas ordered it immediately. The week of the wedding, I flew home and stayed at our parents' house. Corbin was stressed and snippy, but I chalked it up to wedding nerves. The morning of the ceremony, all the groomsmen met at the venue to get ready together. I walked in with Silas and immediately noticed something was wrong. Every single groomsman was wearing a deep burgundy suit. Every single one except Silas, who was standing there in a pale champagne suit, looking like he had walked into the wrong wedding. My stomach dropped. Corbin emerged from the groom's suite, adjusting his cufflinks with this look on his face that I can only describe as satisfied. He clapped his hands together and turned to his best man, his college roommate who had replaced me in the role 2 weeks prior without any real explanation. He said, loud enough for the whole room to hear, that he knew Wes would try something, that I had been jealous of him and Claire since the beginning. I asked him what he was talking about. He told the entire room that I had been obsessed with Claire for years, that I had tried to break them up multiple times, and that he suspected I had deliberately put Silas in the wrong suit to cause drama on his big day. I stood there frozen, while Silas pulled out his phone and showed everyone the text thread with Corbin, the link to the champagne suit, and Corbin's message saying, "This is perfect, order it ASAP." The room went silent. Corbin's face twisted and he started shouting that I must have faked the text somehow, that I was always jealous of him, that I wanted his life. His best man tried to calm him down, but Corbin shoved him away and pointed at me, saying that I had probably slept with Claire, and this was all part of my plan. That is when Claire walked in. She had heard the shouting from the hallway where the bridesmaids were getting ready. She looked at Corbin and asked him what was going on. He rushed to her, telling her that I was trying to ruin everything, that I had always been in love with her. Claire looked at him, then at me, then back at him. She said she had told him 100 times that nothing ever happened between us, that we went on 2 bad dates 5 years ago, and that she was getting really tired of him constantly bringing it up. She said he had made her block me on social media, had gone through her phone weekly looking for messages from me, and had accused her of thinking about me during intimate moments. The room was dead silent. Corbin started crying, saying he just loved her so much and was scared of losing her. Claire took a step back from him. She told him she could not do this anymore, that she had ignored the red flags for too long because she thought he would calm down after the wedding. She said she was sorry, but she could not marry someone who trusted her this little. She walked out. Corbin collapsed onto the floor, sobbing while his best man stood around looking helpless. I grabbed Silas by the arm and we left. We drove to a diner and ordered pancakes, and I sat there in my burgundy groomsman suit eating breakfast at 10 a.m. on what was supposed to be my brother's wedding day. My phone blew up for hours with calls from my parents, from Corbin, from relatives demanding to know what happened. I turned it off and ordered more coffee. 3 months later, I heard through my mom that Corbin had started therapy. He reached out to me last week asking to meet for lunch. He said he had something important to tell me about Claire, something I deserved to know from the beginning. I haven't decided if I'm going yet. I stare at Corbin's text message for the 10th time, reading the words until they start to blur together on my phone screen. I have something important to tell you about Claire, something you deserve to know from the beginning. My stomach twists into knots because I can't imagine what he could possibly reveal now that would actually matter. Claire walked out of that wedding 3 months ago, and honestly, I thought that was the end of it. I set my phone down on my kitchen counter and pick it up again 30 seconds later to reread the message. The words don't change. I grab my phone and pull up Silas's number, pressing call before I can talk myself out of it. He answers on the second ring, and I don't even say hello before launching into it, telling him about Corbin's message and how my hands won't stop shaking. Silas's response is immediate and firm. He tells me I absolutely should not meet Corbin alone, that this could be another setup or manipulation. We talk for 20 minutes, going in circles about whether I should even respond. And finally, we agree that if I decide to do this, he's coming with me as backup. I thank him and hang up. then spend the rest of the evening staring at my phone and trying to figure out what Corbin could possibly need to tell me. I sleep terribly that night, waking up every few hours to check if Corbin has sent another message. He hasn't. The next day at work drags on forever, and I can barely focus on the spreadsheets in front of me because my brain keeps spinning through possibilities. That evening, I text Silas again, and we talk through it one more time. He reminds me that I don't owe Corbin anything, that I can just ignore the message and move on with my life. But something about the way Corbin worded it, the deserve to know from the beginning part, makes me think maybe this is actually important. After 2 days of thinking it over and driving myself crazy with speculation, I finally text Corbin back. I tell him I'll meet him for lunch at a neutral location, a cafe called Riverside that's halfway between our parents' house and my apartment. I add that I'm bringing Silas, and he can take it or leave it. I hit send before I can second guess myself, and then immediately want to throw my phone across the room. My phone buzzes less than 5 minutes later with Corbin's response. He agrees to my terms without any argument or pushback. I stare at his message in complete shock because the old Corbin, the one from before the wedding disaster, would have absolutely demanded it be just the two of us so he could control the conversation and the narrative. This quick agreement to let Silas come makes me nervous in a completely different way. Like maybe Corbin has actually changed, or maybe this is some new kind of manipulation I haven't figured out yet. I forward the text thread to Silas, and he responds with 3 question marks, clearly just as surprised as I am. We agree to meet at my apartment an hour before the lunch so we can drive over together. The morning of the lunch arrives, and I wake up feeling like I might throw up. I try to eat breakfast, but can only manage half a piece of toast before my stomach rebels. Silas shows up at my door right on time, takes one look at my face and pulls me into a hug. He tells me we can still cancel, that we can get in his car right now and drive to the lake instead and forget this whole thing. But I shake my head and grab my jacket because I need to know what Corbin wants to tell me, even if it's going to mess me up all over again. Silas drives because my hands are shaking too much to be safe behind the wheel. He keeps up a steady stream of conversation during the 20-minute drive, talking about his job and his annoying coworker and anything except the lunch we're heading toward. Every few minutes, he reminds me that we can leave anytime I want, that I'm in control of this situation. We arrive at Riverside Cafe 15 minutes early and grab a table in the back corner where I can see the door. I order a coffee I don't drink, and Silas gets a tea he doesn't touch either. We sit there in tense silence, watching every person who walks through the door. When Corbin finally walks in right at noon, I barely recognize him at first. He's lost at least 15 pounds since the wedding, maybe more, and he looks completely exhausted. His face is thinner, his clothes hang loose on his frame, and there are dark circles under his eyes that no amount of sleep seems to have touched. He spots us immediately and walks over slowly, like he's not sure if we're going to get up and leave. He sits down in the empty chair across from me without ordering anything. His hands are shaking as he folds them on the table in front of him. He opens his mouth twice before any words come out, and when they do, his voice is shaking almost as badly as his hands. He apologizes for everything that happened at the wedding, for the accusations and the suit setup and the complete nightmare he put me through. He tells me his therapist, Rowan, has been helping him understand that he had an obsessive jealousy problem that completely destroyed his marriage and damaged his relationship with me. I sit there without saying anything, just listening and trying to process the fact that my brother is actually taking responsibility for his actions. Corbin keeps talking, explaining that Claire had told him about our 2 college dates on their second date together, and he'd been paranoid about it ever since. He admits that he made her block me on social media, that he checked her phone constantly looking for messages from me, that he accused her of thinking about me during their most private moments. His voice cracks when he talks about how he drove her away with his constant suspicion and accusations. He tells me that the suit setup wasn't a last-minute panic or wedding day stress. It was a planned sabotage that he'd been working on for weeks. He wanted to prove to everyone, especially to Claire, that I was trying to ruin his wedding. He thought if he could make me look bad in front of all those people, Claire would finally see that I was the real problem in their relationship, and not his jealousy. He actually believed that humiliating me would somehow fix everything between them. Corbin starts crying now, real tears streaming down his face, and I feel Silas nudge my knee under the table, a small reminder that he's right there. I take a deep breath and ask Corbin the question that's been burning in my mind since I got his text. I ask him why he's telling me all this now, and what the important information about Claire actually is, because so far he hasn't told me anything I didn't already know or couldn't have guessed. Corbin takes a deep breath and wipes his eyes with a napkin that's already falling apart in his hands. He tells me that Claire had actually tried multiple times to invite me to hang out with them as a couple. She wanted to prove there was nothing between us, wanted to show him that we could all be normal together. But every single time she suggested it, he refused and accused her of wanting to cheat. He says he would argue with her for hours after she brought it up, telling her she was trying to humiliate him by forcing him to watch her flirt with me. Claire would try to explain that wasn't her intention at all, that she just wanted him to see how platonic our history was, but he couldn't hear it. He was so deep in his jealousy that any mention of my name sent him into a panic. He shifts in his seat and starts talking faster like he needs to get it all out before he loses his nerve. He reveals that Clare had suggested couples therapy 6 months before the wedding. She was worried about his jealousy and thought a professional could help them work through it together. But Corbin refused and told her she was the one with the problem for not understanding his feelings. He says he actually convinced himself that her suggestion of therapy meant she was planning to leave him for me. In his mind, therapy was just her way of preparing him for the breakup so she wouldn't feel guilty when she ran off with me. He admits now that this made no sense, but at the time it felt completely real and logical to him. Clare tried to explain that therapy would help them both, that it wasn't about blame, but he shut down every conversation about it. The waitress comes by to refill our water glasses, and Corbin stops talking until she walks away. Then he looks directly at me and says, the important information he wanted to tell me is that Clare never had any romantic feelings for me whatsoever, not even a tiny bit. He says his therapist helped him realize he invented an entire story in his head that had no basis in reality. Clare never looked at me in any special way, never mentioned me except when he brought me up, never gave him any actual reason to think she wanted me. He created this whole fantasy where I was secretly in love with her, and she was secretly in love with me, and he was the only one who could see the truth. I sit there completely stunned because I thought he was going to reveal some actual secret. I thought maybe Clare had said something to someone, or there was some incident I didn't know about. But this is just him confirming what I already knew, what everyone at that wedding already knew. I tell him I could have told him that myself since I was there for those 2 awkward coffee dates where we talked about economics homework and realized we had nothing in common. I remind him that I barely remembered her when he first showed me her picture, that I had to think for a minute to even place who she was. Corbin nods and says he knows that now, but he spent years building up this fantasy where I was secretly in love with Clare and trying to steal her from him. He says he even convinced himself that I moved 3 states away specifically to make Clare miss me. In his mind, my job opportunity and my desire for independence didn't matter. Everything I did was part of some elaborate plan to make Clare realize she wanted me instead of him. He would lie awake at night imagining scenarios where Clare would suddenly remember our coffee dates and realize I was the one she wanted. He says his therapist has helped him understand that he was projecting his own insecurities onto me and Clare, creating a villain in his story so he didn't have to face his real fears about not being good enough. Silas finally speaks up, his voice sharp in a way I rarely hear from him. He asks Corbin why he took me off best man and replaced me with his college roommate 2 weeks before the wedding. The question hangs in the air, and I realize I'd almost forgotten about that detail among everything else that happened. Corbin looks down at the table and his face goes red with shame. He admits he was afraid that as best man I would be standing right there next to him, close enough to speak up and defend myself the second he started making his accusations. He wanted me demoted to a regular groomsman, just another face in the line, someone with no standing to interrupt him in front of the room, and he picked his college roommate as the replacement specifically because he knew the guy would go along with whatever Corbin wanted and would never think to defend me. He says his roommate was confused about the sudden change, but accepted it because he didn't want to cause drama before the wedding. I feel anger rising in my chest like hot water filling up a container. This wasn't a moment of wedding day panic or stress-induced paranoia. Corbin had been planning to humiliate me for weeks, maybe months. He had carefully orchestrated the suit colors, the timing, the setup with Silas, all of it. He had removed me as best man specifically to make sure I would have no way to defend myself when he made his accusations in front of everyone. Every detail was calculated and cruel, designed to make me look like the villain in his made-up story. I think about all the phone calls leading up to the wedding where he sounded so grateful for my help, so happy that we were getting closer as brothers. All of that was fake while he was planning this elaborate trap. Corbin reaches across the table trying to grab my hand, but I pull it away before he can touch me. He starts crying harder, and the tears are running down his face faster than he can wipe them away. He says he understands if I never forgive him, that he wouldn't forgive himself if he were in my position, but he needed me to know the truth about how sick his thinking had become. He says his therapist, Rowan, has been helping him understand that he needs to take full responsibility for his actions, not just apologize and expect everything to be okay. He knows he destroyed our relationship and destroyed his marriage, and it was all because of problems that existed only in his head. I ask him if he's been in contact with Clare at all since the wedding. My voice sounds cold, even to my own ears. Corbin shakes his head, and more tears fall onto the table between us. He says Clare blocked his number the same day she walked out, and he found out through a mutual friend that she moved to a different city about a month later. He doesn't blame her for wanting nothing to do with him. He says he put her through hell for their entire relationship, accusing her of things she never did, controlling who she could talk to, checking her phone like a detective, looking for evidence of a crime that never happened. He admits that walking out of that wedding was probably the best decision she ever made, even though it destroyed him at the time. Silas asks the question I'm too angry to voice myself. He wants to know if Corbin has apologized to Clare for what he put her through. Corbin wipes his face with his sleeve and nods slowly. He says he wrote her a letter through his therapist about a month ago. Rowan helped him write something that took responsibility without making excuses or asking for anything in return. He sent it to her new address, but he has has no idea if she ever read it. He says he hopes she did because she deserves to know that none of it was her fault, that she did nothing wrong, but he's not expecting or wanting a response. He just needed her to know that he understands now how badly he treated her. I push my chair back from the table and stand up, my legs feeling shaky after sitting through Corbin's confession. I tell him I need time to process everything he's told me, and I'm not ready to say I forgive him or that we can rebuild our relationship. The words come out flat and tired because I've been holding them in for the past hour while he cried and explained his therapy breakthroughs. Corbin nods and wipes his face with a napkin that's already soaked through. He says he expected that, but he hopes someday I might be willing to try. His voice cracks on the last word, and part of me wants to comfort him, but a bigger part remembers standing in that suite while he accused me of sleeping with Clare in front of everyone. Silas stands up next to me and puts his hand on my shoulder, a silent reminder that we're leaving now. As we're getting up to leave, Corbin mentions that he's also apologized to Silas for setting him up with the wrong suit. He looks at Silas with red, swollen eyes and says he knows it doesn't fix anything, but he wanted Silas to know he was sorry. Silas accepts the apology, but tells Corbin it's going to take more than sorry to fix what he did to both of us. His tone is polite but cold, and I'm grateful he's here because I don't think I could handle this conversation alone. We walk out of the cafe into bright afternoon sunlight that feels wrong for how heavy everything feels. On the drive home, Silas and I sit in silence for 20 minutes before I finally break down crying. The tears come suddenly and I can't stop them. Big ugly sobs that make my whole body shake. Silas pulls over into a gas station parking lot and just sits with me while I cry into my hands. I'm not even sure if I'm crying from anger, relief, or grief for the brother relationship I thought we were building. Maybe it's all three mixed together into something I don't have words for. Silas doesn't try to make me stop or tell me it's going to be okay. He just hands me napkins from the glove box and waits until I can breathe normally again. When I finally calm down enough to talk, I tell him I don't know what to do with all of this information. Knowing that Corbin planned everything, that he deliberately set up that suit situation to humiliate me, makes it worse somehow. Silas says we don't have to figure it out right now. We can just go home and watch bad TV and order too much food. That sounds perfect. So I nod and he pulls back onto the road. That evening, my mom calls asking how the lunch went because Corbin told her we met. I give her a brief summary while sitting on my couch with a takeout container in my lap. Mom listens without interrupting, and when I finish, she lets out a long sigh. She admits she and Dad have been worried about Corbin's mental health for years, but didn't know how to address it. This surprises me because my parents never talked about Corbin having problems when we were growing up. Mom says they noticed things, but hoped he would outgrow them, which clearly didn't happen. I ask her what kind of things they noticed, and there's a long pause before she answers. Mom reveals that Corbin had similar jealousy issues with his high school girlfriend, accusing her guy friends of trying to steal her. He would call her constantly to check where she was and who she was with. They thought he'd grown out of it, but clearly the problems went deeper than they realized. I ask her why they never sat us down and talked about it, why they let us grow up thinking Corbin was just confident and I was just quiet. Mom is silent for a long moment and then admits that they were scared of making things worse, that they thought naming the problem would make it real. She says she has spent a lot of nights lately wondering how different everything might have been if they had gotten Corbin help when he was 16, instead of hoping a girlfriend could love the jealousy out of him. She tells me she called that high school girlfriend a few weeks ago, after all these years, just to apologize for encouraging her to stay when she should have told her to run. The girl, who is a grown woman now with a family of her own, was gracious about it, but Mom says she could hear in her voice that the whole thing had left a mark. I sit with that for a second. The idea that Corbin's pattern has a trail of people behind it, each one told to be patient, each one made to feel like the jealousy was somehow their job to fix. I sit there holding my phone and wondering how I never knew any of this. Mom says they didn't want to label Corbin or make him feel bad about himself, so they just encouraged the girlfriend to be patient with him. She eventually broke up with him anyway because the jealousy was too much. I tell Mom I wish someone had warned Claire about this pattern before she got engaged to him. Mom's voice gets quiet, and she says they thought about it but didn't want to interfere in Corbin's relationship. She sounds guilty now, like she's realizing they should have said something. We talk for another 15 minutes before I tell her I need to go. After we hang up, I sit in the dark thinking about how many people saw warning signs and said nothing. 2 weeks after the lunch, I get a text from Becca, Claire's best friend from the wedding. I recognize her name from the guest list and remember seeing her standing with the bridesmaids that morning. She asks if we can talk because Claire wanted to reach out to me, but wasn't sure if it would be appropriate. My first thought is that this is strange, but then I remember Claire was a victim in all of this too. I text back saying sure, we can talk. Becca suggests meeting for coffee the next day at a place near my apartment. I agree to meet Becca for coffee, curious about what Claire wants to say. The next afternoon, I walk into a small coffee shop and find Becca already sitting at a corner table. She looks tired, like she hasn't been sleeping well. We shake hands and I sit down across from her. Becca explains that Claire felt terrible that I got caught up in Corbin's accusations and wanted to apologize for not defending me more strongly that day. She says Claire has been beating herself up about it for months, replaying that morning morning over and over. I tell Becca that Clare doesn't owe me an apology because she was dealing with her own crisis in that moment. Becca nods, but says Clare still wants me to know she wishes she had handled things differently. She pulls out her phone and shows me a text from Clare that basically says the same thing. Becca tells me that Clare had actually been planning to call off the wedding the week before, but her parents convinced her to try one more time. They told her every couple has problems, and marriage would make things better. Clare knew that was wrong, but she loved Corbin and wanted to believe he would change. Becca says Clare regrets not trusting her instincts and walking away sooner. She thinks if she had ended things privately before the wedding, I wouldn't have been dragged into the mess. I appreciate that Clare is thinking about me, but I tell Becca that Corbin would have found another way to blame me for the breakup. His problems weren't really about me or Clare. They were about whatever was going on in his own head. I ask Becca if Clare knew about the suit setup plan, and Becca says absolutely not. Clare was genuinely shocked when she walked into that room and heard what Corbin was saying about me. Becca says Clare had no idea Corbin had sent Silas the wrong suit color on purpose. She thought it was an honest mistake until she saw how satisfied Corbin looked when he started making accusations. That's when everything clicked for her, and she realized how far gone he really was. Becca leans back in her chair and says Clare spent the whole morning getting ready, thinking about how to bring up her concerns about the relationship one more time. She never imagined she'd walk in on a planned attack. I believe Becca because Clare's face that morning showed real confusion and horror. Becca gives me Clare's new number and says Clare would like to apologize directly if I'm open to it. She writes it down on a napkin and slides it across the table. I take the number but tell Becca part of me wants to talk to Clare and clear the air, but another part thinks it might be better to just let everything stay in the past. Becca says she understands and tells me to take my time. We finish our coffee and talk about other things for a while, just normal conversation about work and life. It's nice to have a casual chat that isn't about wedding drama or family problems. When we leave the coffee shop, Becca gives me a quick hug and says she hopes I'm doing okay. I tell her I'm working on it, which feels like the most honest answer I can give. I spend the next month throwing myself into work, taking on extra projects that keep my brain too busy to spiral. Silas checks in on me every few days, and one Friday he shows up at my apartment with 2 packed bags and announces we're going to the coast for the weekend. I don't argue because I know he's right that I need to get away from everything. We drive 3 hours to a small beach town and rent a cheap motel room that smells like salt water and old carpet. We spend Saturday walking along the shore, and Silas lets me talk through everything that happened without interrupting or trying to fix it. I tell him how strange it feels that my brother's mental health crisis became the defining moment of my year, how I'm angry at Corbin, but also sad for him, how I don't know if I'll ever trust him again, even if he gets better. Silas listens and nods, and occasionally throws shells into the waves. Sunday morning, we sit on the beach eating donuts and watching the sunrise, and I realize this is the first time in weeks that my chest doesn't feel tight. When we drive home that afternoon, I feel like maybe I can actually move forward instead of just surviving. On the drive back, Silas asks me the question I have been avoiding, whether I actually want a relationship with Corbin again, or whether I just feel like I am supposed to want one. I don't have an answer for him. I tell him that some mornings I wake up furious, replaying the exact moment my brother pointed at me across that room and told 200 people I had tried to steal his wife. And some mornings I wake up thinking about the two of us as kids building forts in the backyard before any of this poison got into him. Silas says both of those things can be true, that I don't have to pick one and pretend the other doesn't exist. I look out the window at the highway going by and decide that is the most useful thing anyone has said to me in months. The next week, I'm sitting at my desk staring at Clare's number that Becca gave me. I've picked up my phone a dozen times and put it back down because I don't know what I'd even say to her. But then I think about how she walked out of that wedding and probably spent months dealing with her own mess. And maybe we both deserve to clear the air. I send her a text that just says it's me and asks if she wants to talk sometime. She responds within an hour saying yes and gives me her new number since she changed it after everything happened. We set up a time for Thursday evening, and I spend the next 3 days being nervous about a phone call with someone I barely know. When Thursday comes, I almost cancel 5 times, but at 7 I dial her number and she picks up on the second ring. The first few minutes are so awkward that I consider faking bad reception and hanging up. But then Clare says she's been wanting to apologize to me for months, and suddenly the conversation gets easier. She tells me she feels terrible that I got dragged into Corbin's accusations, that she should have defended me more strongly in that moment instead of just defending herself. I can hear genuine guilt in her voice, and it makes me feel less alone in this whole situation. Clare starts explaining how she ignored so many red flags because Corbin was perfect in every other way. She says he was loving and supportive and funny, and she convinced herself that his jealousy was just insecurity that would fade once they got married and he felt more secure in the relationship. She thought if she just proved her loyalty enough times, blocked me on social media like he asked, let him check her phone whenever he wanted, that eventually he'd trust her. She admits now that she was wrong to think marriage would fix his problems, and she wishes she'd recognized the patterns earlier. I listened to her talk about checking in with him constantly when she was out with friends, about avoiding male co-workers because it upset him, about the time he accused accused her of thinking about me during sex, and she actually tried to convince him that wasn't true instead of recognizing how messed up the accusation was. She sounds exhausted just recounting it all, and I start to understand that she was drowning in that relationship long before the wedding day. She tells me about the rules that built up so slowly she didn't notice them becoming rules. No lunches alone with coworkers, no liking a photo online without explaining who the person was, a text back within 10 minutes or a phone call demanding to know why she went quiet. She says none of it looked like control from the inside because Corbin always framed it as him just loving her too much to lose her. She says the scariest part is how reasonable it all felt while it was happening, how she started policing herself before he even had to ask, cutting off friendships and turning down invitations just to avoid the fight that would come if she went. She says it took her therapist 3 sessions just to get her to admit that any of it was abnormal because she had spent so long defending it to herself. I tell Claire she doesn't owe me an apology because she was dealing with her own crisis that morning, and I don't blame her for how she reacted. I explain that I was just collateral damage in Corbin's issues, but she was the actual target of all that jealousy and control. We end up talking for over an hour, and I realize she's actually a really decent person who got caught in a bad situation with someone she loved. She tells me about the guilt she felt leaving Corbin sobbing on the floor, how his parents were furious with her for embarrassing the family, how half their mutual friends took his side because they couldn't believe kind Corbin would do something so calculated. She moved to a new city 2 months after the wedding disaster because she couldn't handle running into people who knew them as a couple. I find myself feeling protective of her, even though we're basically strangers, because I know what it's like to be blamed for Corbin's problems. Claire mentions she started therapy right after the wedding, working through her own trust issues and learning to spot unhealthy relationship patterns before they get that bad. Her therapist helped her understand that she'd been in a controlling relationship and didn't even realize it because Corbin's control came wrapped in love and concern. She says walking out of that wedding was the hardest thing she's ever done, but also the best decision because staying would have destroyed her eventually. I hear real conviction in her voice when she talks about it, like she's finally accepted that leaving was the right choice, even though it felt awful. She asks how I'm doing with everything, and I'm honest that I'm still processing it all, still deciding if I want to rebuild a relationship with Corbin or just let it go. Claire doesn't give me advice, but she listens, really listens, and that feels more valuable than any advice could be. We end the call agreeing to stay in touch as friends, which feels strange considering she's my brother's ex, and we went on 2 terrible dates years ago, but it also feels healthy and honest. There's something freeing about talking to someone who understands exactly what Corbin's jealousy looks like from the inside. After we hang up, I sit on my couch for a while thinking about how strange life is, how the wedding disaster connected me to someone I never would have known otherwise. I save her new number in my phone under just Claire. No last name, no context, just a person who gets it. 3 months pass and I'm getting coffee before work when my phone buzzes with a text from Corbin. He's asking if I'd be willing to meet again, saying he's made real progress in therapy and wants to share some things he's learned about himself. I stare at the message while my coffee gets cold, trying to figure out how I feel about seeing him again. Part of me wants to ignore it and keep living my life without his drama, but another part is curious about what he wants to say. I text Silas asking what he thinks, and Silas says I should do whatever feels right for me, that he'll support either decision. I spend 2 days thinking about it before I finally respond to Corbin saying yes, I'll meet him, but this time, I want to do it alone without Silas there. I need to know if Corbin and I can have a real conversation without a buffer. We agree to meet at the same cafe where we had lunch before, and when I walk in, Corbin is already there at a corner table. He looks different, healthier somehow, like he's been sleeping through the night and eating regular meals. His face has filled back out, and he's dressed simply, nothing like the perfectly put together version of him I grew up with. I sit down across from him and order tea, and we make awkward small talk for a few minutes about the weather and work. Then Corbin takes a deep breath and tells me he's been diagnosed with something called obsessive-compulsive disorder with relationship-focused obsessions. He explains that his therapist, Rowan, helped him understand that the intrusive thoughts about me and Claire weren't rational jealousy. They were a symptom of OCD that made his brain get stuck on fears of abandonment and betrayal. He's on medication now and learning coping strategies in therapy, and he says it's like someone turned down the volume on the constant anxious noise in his head. Corbin starts explaining that his jealousy was never really about me or Claire specifically. It was about this deep terror of being abandoned that came from our childhood. He talks about how we were always compared to each other, how he felt like he had to be perfect to be loved because any flaw meant I would be chosen over him. He says he internalized this idea that love was conditional and could be stolen away if someone better came along, so he tried to control everything to prevent that from happening. I sit there listening and realizing that while I spent our childhood feeling invisible next to him, he spent it feeling like he was one mistake away from losing everything. We both grew up in the same house but experienced completely different versions of our family, and neither of us knew what the other was going through. I take a breath and tell Corbin that I need to share something too, that growing Growing up, I always felt like I was in his shadow. He looks confused, so I explain how I was just the younger brother who wasn't as impressive or accomplished, how I felt invisible next to him. Corbin's face changes and he says he had no idea I felt that way, that he always thought I had it easier because there was less pressure on me. We sit there for a long time talking about our childhood in a way we never have before, both of us realizing we spent years misunderstanding each other's experience. He tells me about feeling like he had to be perfect or he'd lose our parents' love, and I tell him about feeling like nothing I did mattered because he'd already done it better. I tell him about the specific things, the way our parents kept his trophies on the mantle and my report cards in a drawer, the way relatives would ask him about his plans and ask me if I was helping him with his. I tell him I stopped trying to compete somewhere around 15 because I had already decided I would lose. Corbin listens with his jaw tight, and when I finish he says he never once saw a competition, that from where he stood I was the one who got to be free, the one who could fail without the whole family holding its breath. We go back and forth like that for a while, each of us handing over a piece of a childhood the other one apparently lived in a completely different version of. At one point he laughs, a short sad laugh, and says it is almost funny that we spent 20 years in the same house feeling like the loser of the same contest. I don't laugh, but I understand what he means. It's the first truly honest conversation we've ever had about being brothers. When we're getting ready to leave the cafe, Corbin asks if there's anything he can do to make up for everything beyond just saying sorry. I think about it for a minute and tell him the most important thing is that he keeps going to therapy and working on his mental health, not just for me, but for himself. He nods and says Rowan has been helping him understand that his problems go deeper than just the wedding situation. We walk out to the parking lot together and stand by our cars for a few minutes just talking about normal things like work and the weather. Before we drive away, Corbin suggests that maybe we could try rebuilding our relationship slowly, like meeting for coffee once a month, where we can practice talking to each other honestly. I agree and tell him there's no pressure to become best friends overnight. We're just committing to try. He looks relieved and gives me a quick hug before getting in his car. I drive home feeling lighter than I have in months, like maybe there's a chance for us after all. A few days later, I'm at my parents' house for Sunday dinner when my Aunt Ronnie pulls me aside in the kitchen. She tells me she's proud of me for being willing to give Corbin another chance while still keeping healthy boundaries. Ronnie has always been the wise one in our family, the person everyone goes to for advice about relationships and life problems. She says what I'm doing is what real forgiveness looks like, that it's not about pretending nothing happened, but about choosing to move forward anyway. I tell her I'm scared Corbin might fall back into old patterns, and she reminds me that's why the boundaries matter, that I can support his growth without letting him hurt me again. We rejoin everyone in the dining room, and I notice my parents watching Corbin and me interact with this hopeful look on their faces, like they're afraid to believe things might actually get better between us. 3 months later, I'm at work when my phone buzzes with a text from Claire. I haven't heard from her in a while, so I'm curious what she wants. The message says she started dating someone new and it's going really well, that she wanted to thank me for being a supportive friend during her healing process. I text back saying I'm genuinely happy for her and asking how she's been. She calls me during my lunch break and we talk for 20 minutes about her life and her new partner. She sounds lighter, like she's finally moved past everything that happened with Corbin. I tell her about Corbin's progress in therapy and she says she's glad he's getting help, but she's not ready to have any contact with him yet. I understand completely and tell her she doesn't owe him anything. Before we hang up, she says she hopes Corbin and I can build something healthy together, that brothers are important. After the call, I sit in my car thinking about how strange it is that Claire and I are friends now when we barely knew each other before all this happened. The wedding disaster connected us in this odd way, both of us survivors of Corbin's obsession. 6 months pass, and I get invited to a small family dinner at my parents' house. When I arrive, Corbin is already there helping Mom set the table. We say hi to each other and fall into easy conversation about a show we both watch. It's not perfect, and there are still some awkward moments, but it feels genuine in a way our relationship never did before. We all sit down to eat, and Dad asks Corbin about his new job, and he talks about it without the fake confidence he used to have when trying to prove everything was perfect. Later, when we're clearing dishes, Mom pulls me into the hallway and says she's so relieved to see Corbin and me talking and laughing together. I can tell she was worried we'd never speak again after the wedding disaster. Throughout the evening, I catch myself actually enjoying Corbin's company, not forcing it or pretending, but genuinely finding him funny and interesting. When I'm leaving, Corbin walks me to my car and tells me he started volunteering with a mental health advocacy group. He explains that he's been sharing his story at their meetings to help other people recognize obsessive relationship patterns before they destroy their lives. I'm surprised and quietly impressed that he's turned his worst moment into something that might actually help someone. He says Rowan encouraged him to find a way to give back, and this felt right. I tell him I think that takes real guts. He smiles at me then, and it is nothing like the smile I grew up watching him perform for everyone else. It is smaller, and it is real. I tell him I'll see him next month. It is the first thing I have said to him in 2 years that I did not have to force out of myself, and he hears it, and I can tell he hears it.